Up here in Canada, there's been a huge shit show over in Quebec about this Bill 68, which is banning the Niqab and burqa while receiving public services. So, what this is saying is that this new bill that will be put in place will essentially ban these face coverings, and it's not just related to the niqab and the burqa, but it also says that balaclavas, ski masks, scarves covering part of your face, even sunglasses would get affected, and you can't wear these in these areas. This would include things like parks, using the bus, as well as just getting government services, such as going to, get your license or something like that. So for a long time now, there's been debate going on in Quebec about religious material in public. There was one that went down, I think it was in 2015 during the provincial elections, is that the Parti Québécois, or at least their provincial affiliate, they ended up trying to push this along with another referendum and pretty much lost everything in because of it. It was really funny to see. But now we have the Quebec Liberal Party, which has pushed this bill through. The bill was passed despite opposition from the Parti Québécois and the Coalition Avenir Québec, which argued the legislation does not go far enough to restrict the wearing of conspicuous religious symbols. Justice Minister Stéphanie Vallée has maintained that the bill's requirement that government services be provided and received with the face uncovered is not aimed at any religious groups. Really? It's not aimed at any religious groups? Are you telling me in the middle of winter when someone comes in with, say, a balaclava on or a giant scarf that's wrapped up around their head, that you give them service without taking it off? Is that what you're telling me? Come on. Don't bullshit me and my watchers and listeners. They're a lot smarter than that. It's very clear this is targeted towards a religious group. Although we're talking about getting a government services and stuff that requires ID, then yeah, absolutely you should take it off, because if we can't see your face, if all we can see is, especially concerning the niqab, which all you can see is the eyes, then you can't really get a facial recognition because of that. The only thing you could tell is what their skin color is. But anyway, this justice minister ends up saying, having your face uncovered is a legitimate question of communication, identification, and security. She said this on the eve of the bill's adoption, but the title of the law, an act to foster adherence to state religious neutrality, leaves little doubt to the true motivation. You're trying to argue that it's not religiously motivated when the bill is literally saying you're trying to uphold state neutrality in religion. I guess in Quebec, they really think the people over there are stupid and that they can't at least read the main part of a bill and the fucking headline. Initially aimed only at provincial services, the Liberals widened the law's scope in August to embody municipal services, including public transit and subsidized housing offices. Nicole Fillon, coordinator of the Ligue des Droits et Libertés, a human rights defense group, warned that the law will have a discriminatory effect on religious groups who are targeted, in particular women. And for anybody who doesn't speak French, they are the coordinator of the League of Rights and Liberties. But let's say that quote again. This time we'll say it with a French accent. They say the law will have a discriminatory effect on religious groups who are targeted, in particular women. It's okay, I can say that. My father was born in Quebec. Yves Torres, Quebec representative of the National Council of Canadian Muslims, said the law infringes on religious freedom and will almost certainly be challenged in court, without a doubt. I can already start hearing the Quebec courts blowing up as hundreds, if not thousands, of Canadian Muslims start filing their application to sue the goddamn government. Quebec has wrestled with the issue of religious accommodation since it became a central issue in the 2007 provincial election, leading to a public commission. In 2013, the Parti Québécois government introduced a charter of values that would have prohibited public sector workers from wearing any conspicuous religious symbols. The PQ was defeated before the charter was adopted. Holy shit, that was in 2013, not 2015? I'm getting old. Quebec is the first jurisdiction in North America with a law prohibiting women who wear the niqab or burqa from receiving public services. France outlawed the face covering garment in all public places in 2011, and Belgium and Austria have followed suit. In the Netherlands, women cannot wear the full veil in schools, hospitals, or on public transportation. Fillon fears Quebec is headed in the same direction as France. We are moving gradually towards banning it in public space. When we are controlling what people wear in public transit, we are pretty far along. I have to find that I agree with him on that one. I don't ever like the idea of a government telling people what to do or what to wear. Only the Liberals voted in favor of the bill, but they were able to carry the vote 66 to 51. This eventually went to the federal level. And, we're looking for all of the major party leaders to comment on and see what they have to say. And they all had different reactions to it. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh attacked Quebec's religious neutrality bill Wednesday. That was just past Wednesday. Positioning the New Democrats more strongly against the bill than any other major federal party. He said, quote, "I think that this is a law that violates human rights. I'm completely opposed to the bill, but I'm completely confident in the existing protections that are in place in Quebec that will protect human rights." Singh has had a stronger stance against the law than the Liberal government, which has so far been reluctant to condemn it outright. In the House of Commons on Wednesday, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom applied to all Canadians. He ended up saying, quote, "I will continue to work to ensure that all Canadians are protected by the Charter, while respecting the choices of different governments at different levels. Here at the federal level, we defend the rights of all Canadians." How was my Trudeau impression? Let me know in the comments below. Was it good? Was it shitty? I've honestly never tried it before, but that's more or less the way he talks. The office of the Heritage Minister Mélanie Joly has issued a statement to the National Post. As the Prime Minister has said on numerous occasions, we do not believe that the government should be telling people what they can and cannot wear, the statement reads. With regard to the legislation in question, it is a matter for the Quebec National Assembly where it has been debated at length and it will not interfere. I think fundamentally we can't have the state tell people what to wear, what not to wear. That to me reflects a law that is discriminatory and that breaks the fundamental principles of human rights. For the Conservative Party, Jake Entright, director of communications for the Conservative leader Andrew Scheer, ended up making a statement saying, "Ultimately, it's up to the Quebecers to pass judgment on this legislation. The Conservative Party believes every Canadian has the right to expose themselves and practice their religion, not just in private, but also in public office too." Okay, so for anybody out there that's not Canadian watching, most likely Americans, one thing, I don't know if you have this much going on, maybe you have as much of a state battle as we're having right now with our province battle. One thing that makes our battle with Quebec a little bit different is the history of Canada. France colonized Quebec and Britain colonized the rest of Canada and, America and all that shit. Anyway, when after our war with France over here in Canada, we ended up coming to essentially an agreement with them. We give them Quebec, and they're recognized as they're essentially a nation within a nation. So that way Quebec actually has more say in what they can do with their province than any other province in Canada. And that's because they're trying to hold on to their French heritage. So that's why so many of these leaders, you may have noticed, have been so resistant to actually make a full-on statement on this and say what should be done, but always are saying it needs to revert back to the Quebec Provincial level in order for a decision to be made. This is because if they were to actually put forward what they're full out and say how they felt and how it should proceed, then it looks like they're infringing on Quebec's right to uphold their own culture and their own heritage. And this has been a very common defense by Quebec in order to get the federal government off their back. Sometimes it is a relevant defense for them. It is actually times they are defending their culture and their heritage. Many times it's just a leveraging tool they use to their advantage to get the way they want. So, for anybody who isn't aware of that or living outside of the United States, that's really the main important part about this. What I find a little bit interesting, though, is been our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's reaction to all this. He's pretty much been hands off the whole situation and said, it's up to them to make their own decision, not our job to tell them what to do. That, of course, for the reason I just stated. But what's really interesting about it is that he really took a back seat on this in comparison to what he usually would do in a situation like this. See, back in this one for sure was back in 2015. A little bit before our election went down and Justin Trudeau was voted into office, Stephen Harper was trying to push a bill that would ban the niqab and other face coverings from Muslim women when they came to the country. And when they took a citizenship oath, they had to unveil for the citizenship oath. And this caused a lot of controversy at the time. NDP leader Tom Mulcair was completely against it, and even Trudeau put up a real knip shit about this. And he was completely against the Prime Minister at the time, Stephen Harper's bill. And I don't know if he actually said the terms racist, but he was definitely implying it in those terms, that it is a racist bill. What ended up happening to this bill is it got challenged by a Muslim woman in court. Eventually it got struck down as unconstitutional. So the ban on this wasn't able to be put in place. At the time, Prime Minister Harper was asked by why the government should be able to tell people like this woman Ishak, who was the one who challenged it and in the end won out and was allowed to wear her covering during the citizenship ceremony. When asked why the government should be able to tell people like Ishak how to dress and how to live, he said that the government is trying to promote the broad view that Canada is an open and equal society and that there are times when people must reveal their identity. Following their victories over the Tories in October 2015, the Trudeau Liberals made a great show of dropping Harper's Supreme Court appeal to uphold the niqab ban. Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould personally called Zunera Ishak to inform her that the Liberals were ending the Ottawa's legal action. The problem is that this new bill by Quebec is a much more controversial bill in that it's much more widespread. Harper's, you just had to take the citizenship unveiled. This one would be on transit, essentially everywhere, getting your service, and just almost in public anywhere. But on this one, he was pretty much was refusing to make a peep. He even refused to say whether he believed that the law violated the Charter of Rights, saying instead that there will be a lot of reflections on the law's constitutionality. He promised only to look at how this will unfold with full respect for the National Assembly that has the right to pass its own laws. Some of the other problems with this that's going to come are a little unforeseen now, but will affect us in the future. According to Statistics Canada, the Muslim population is going to double in 20 years and it's going to make up 7.2% of the nation. That's going to be about 2.5 million people who are from Muslim descent, and this is a bill that seems to target them. One report that was released in April of 2016 by the Environics Institute, it was a comprehensive report on Muslims, said, quote, Muslims are one of the most religiously observant groups in Canada, and their religious identity and practice appear to be strengthening rather than weakening as their lives evolve in Canada. At the moment when they were conducting their survey, Environics tallied female Muslims and found a mere 3% wear the niqab, but a decade earlier the number showed only 1% wore it. It could very well continue to double. I think that's almost inevitable unless something changes in Islam itself and the women themselves stop wearing the niqab, the hijab, the burqa. But if they don't, then yeah, absolutely, we're just going to see that continue on, and there will be more women walking around with a niqab. Likewise, for head coverings in general, 42% of Muslim women wore them in 2006, but now that's pushed into majority territory, with 53% donning either hijab, chador, or niqab. Niqabs or burqa should have no place in civilized society. Quebec professor Boksana Nazin, a Muslim woman born in Bangladesh, told Tariq Fatah in his latest Sun column. It is neither religious nor cultural. It is an anti-West political statement introduced by radical Islamists all over the globe. End quote. So these have been the concerns. However, just tonight, which is October 24th, at about 8 o'clock, 8:30, there was an article that got put out by CTV News, and it was an update on this. And what they said is that in fact Quebecers can browse a library, ride a bus, and sit in a hospital waiting room with their faces covered, according to the clarification of Bill 62 offered by the province. But the rules still make it clear that in-person interactions with public employees must be conducted on a literal face-to-face basis. In a quote made, the government ended up saying, nobody will refuse to use a public transit, nobody will be refused emergency health care, nobody will be chased out of a public library in Quebec. Quebec Justice Minister Stephanie Vallée apologized repeatedly for what she called a widespread misunderstanding of the law while speaking at a press conference. Last week, she said a person with any type of face coverings would have to remove it for the entire duration of a bus ride or interaction with a public servant. Now, she explains, only those using a photo ID card would have to expose their faces, and only long enough to be identified. Montreal Mayor Dennis Coderre said that he expects to see legal challenge against the bill. I don't think that it's valid, he said. At the end of the day, there is no sanction. McGill Faculty of Law professor Daniel Weinstock agrees. I think that if it doesn't stand a chance before the equality provision of both the Quebec and the Canadian Charter, let alone the freedom of religion provision, he said. I think it's almost unavoidable that the Muslim community will see this as an attack on them personally. I mean, it obviously is. This is going to affect very few people, but the religion is a big part to Muslim people, so if they're not able to cover their faces in the name of their religion, they're going to see this as a big insult and a big bullseye on their backs. I'm kind of split on this one. Now, I guess it kind of changes with seeing this update as to what things are. Because before, if it was just talking in all public places, that does change things a little bit, where I could support the bill in that I think that people dealing with government services and where they need to identify themselves should have to unveil. But if we're talking about a park or a bus, then we're getting into the territory of the individual making their own choices. I think it's fair when accessing government aid that you do have to unveil to be identified, or anything else you have to be identified with. These are perfectly fair laws to put in place because, well, here in the West, we don't cover our faces typically. So if somebody from another culture that do want to come over and live here, then they've got to respect the laws we put in place, and covering up your face here is not the norm. And personally, I don't like the niqab, the burqa, the hijab, any of that. I just see it as a symbol of oppression. I know there's probably plenty of Muslim women that would tell me otherwise, but I still don't agree with them. But I don't like these coverings, and it worries me whenever I'm walking down the street and I'm starting to see more and more women that are covered up, especially the younger they are. I sometimes have seen some girls that are 6 years old that are wearing hijab, and I just think it's awful that at that age, that's the sort of message they're being sent. So I do agree with the bill in this regard, and I guess it kind of changes my initial opinion of this next part, but what I was essentially going to say is that on the flip side, I am against government telling you how to dress, how to act, and that. I've already stated that before, and also I'm against government that installs religious laws, actually. It might sound a little weird as an atheist saying I don't like religious laws, but I've said before that essentially being an atheist and able to express your views falls under the same rights and freedoms as religious people do to express their own. I mean, if that provision is not in place and we got a Muslim government or a Christian government or something of the sort, then if we don't have that provision in place, then there's nothing stopping them from squashing atheistic voices or secular voices. So that's one reason I'm against it. The other reason is this is getting too involved in people's lives, telling them how to wear and making rules against their religion. It has not ended well historically, and I could not see it ending well now. It hasn't ended well when it's been whether it's a religious country installing their own laws, or whether it's been more of a secular atheist country that are trying to repress religion, such as, say, the USSR, the old Soviet Union. So we can look to the Middle East to see the problems of installing religious laws that are in favor of religion. We can look towards old communist states to see what happens when we install laws repressing religion. And then we have the historical look in the West of what Christian nations were like and the laws that they had and what sort of repression they imposed. So none of it ever ends well. So I am just against religious laws altogether, both repressing religion and supporting religion. I personally would like to see the religious battle fought and won in the marketplace of ideas. Let's beat people with our arguments. Let's beat people with our intellect. Let's not beat them through force and repression, which has historically been a religious tactic of going against anybody, whether they be atheist or another religion. It's a way of keeping them down. Historically been a religious tactic, and I don't want to see secularists and atheists falling into that trap.